This book began as a miniseries, but I'm really excited to say that because it sold out up to its fourth or fifth printing on its first issue, that we're going to get an ongoing series, and that's just awesome. I can say this, that Boom Studios is just blowing everyone out of the water for my pull list. I have more Boom and Marvel books on my pull list than any other publisher. Again, really loving Once and Future as well. That's by Kieran Gillen, and I'm also loving Angel by Brian Edward Hill. So this one, Something is Killing the Children. Number 2 is written by James Tynion. The art is by Werther Deladera, and Miguel Muerto is doing the color. So this series, it continues on a high note, and I will say this about this number 2, not as much of a shock and not as many twists and turns and reveals, but it's still very engaging, and you do get some reveals, and I will say this, it is hard to top a perfect first issue, and that's pretty much what I had to say about that first one. I still feel that way after rereading it a couple of times. Comics that I love, I like to sit and actually dive into them multiple times and brood over them. I'm doing the same thing with the House of X and Powers of 10 series by Hickman. And just like those, rereading and rereading those kinds of books, those are the ones I love. And again, I love this. I'm just going to talk a little bit up to about halfway through this book. So in the very beginning, they're introducing a new character, and you get some immediate character development with him having a conversation with his mom. And something that I love about the art here, by Deladera, and I said this about the first one, and it's absolutely the same thing. I can feel the emotion in the characters' faces. And, again, I'm not a huge art critic. I wouldn't know what the qualities make art fantastic. In fact, sometimes I'm a bad judge of art. But I will say this, if you can capture emotion, because comic books, they're a visual medium, and if you're able to bring out that emotion without words, just by looking at the characters' faces, you're doing your job. Part of it, of course, there's so much more to it than that, but I will say this, just absolutely awesome storytelling, right? And storytelling in the pictures as well. So we kind of have to guess about this next little bit, and you have this new character coming out. Apparently he's the manager of a restaurant. You find that out just in normal conversation, which is great. Again, you don't have exposition telling. You have a conversation revealing things about these characters naturally. And that's something that a lot of modern comics are actually lacking. And so when I see that in a book, specifically in an independent book that's such a small publisher, I'm really happy. I'm really glad to see that proper storytelling, how it's so engaging that it flows in such a way where you can read it from front to back in one sitting and you have no distractions. You want to do nothing other than read the book, and that's exactly what happened the first time I read this book, and I love this imagery. You find out in this one page, it's its own panel, that there's something deeper going on. Again, it reveals, of course, that there's something spiritual or supernatural happening to these monsters. They're not just monsters that haunt this lake, and there's a phasing in and out, because that monster is right there staring at him, and just like a vampire, you're looking in the mirror or the car door window, and you see that there's no reflection. He can feel the dark presence of this bloody monster that is brooding over him as he gets inside of his vehicle, and he can feel its presence. He says, "Is anyone there?" And yeah, that huge monster's right there, bro. You can't see it, but that's disturbing imagery from the very beginning. And, I love it. We're picking up right where we left off with, the main character James. Again, I love that the writer has named the main character, the kid, after him. Attributing his own kind of emotion or his own kind of perspective into this character. Again, it's really, if you haven't watched my last video on this book, go ahead and check it out. I'll leave that in the description below. Because I talk about something great, that when you do that, you actually put your own emotion into the book itself. When you name the main character after yourself, it's a great strategy to really helping to humanize characters in such a way. Again, I really like this. So where do you start? How do you hunt monsters? And she says, we start by figuring out where to start. So you get a fun little exchange, and you see what's happening here. This new character that was introduced in the very beginning, he crosses paths with this woman who is a shady character, but is clearly, at this point, a monster hunter. And, she kind of rents a table from him, and they sit down and they begin looking through stuff and, talking about the process, where to begin. And, you get some dialogue, some exchanges. The waitress is kind of weird to them, and I love James. He says, "Have you done this kind of thing before? You're acting like you've done this kind of thing before." Clearly talking about hunting monsters. And yes, you see in this very next page, each panel, and this is my favorite page. Well, that's not true. This is my second favorite page from this entire book. It's beautiful. Her just killing these monsters with guns, with knives, covered in blood. And I'll say this about the art. I like these. I like something that happened here, and that is a big deal when you're writing and creating these panels. If you're doing a flashback or something that has happened in the past, you want to differentiate those panels from the normal panels. And you see the here in this every normal panel, it's just drawn as a perfect square, but the past, it's a lot more raw. And even the way that the art is done inside the panel, it looks dreamlike because it's rough is the best way I know to describe it. Again, not being a critic of art, more of, I'm a writer, so I look at art and I don't know really always how to describe it, but I do my best. And again, these panels around the edges are super rough and they look sketched. Everything in the art looks sketched for the flashback. So, and the colors are completely different. So again, great job showing that there's a flashback happening. You shouldn't have to tell someone. They should just be able to look at it and be like, okay, it's different. That's a different time frame. So absolutely, this whole creative team does a great job of checking the boxes off for exactly the kind of good writing and storytelling collectively, because look, the art is a part of storytelling. You can't think that just because the writer is the writer that they're doing all of the writing. I would have to say that the artists themselves, they're just as much a part of that storytelling process as the writer. And so when writers give an artist more free reign over what they should be able to do and accomplish in the story, including camera angles, all kinds of things, there's great examples of that, all for the better. It allows for more free range. As, in my opinion, hey, this is all just opinions. That's what critiques of comic books are. And I'm full of opinions, if you haven't noticed. But again, I'm loving this series. This is a step in the perfect direction for a number 2. Again, like I said, it's difficult to top a perfect first horror book. It really is. And I would have to say that Something is Killing the Children is the best horror book of this entire year. And so this number 2 is right on par to doing exactly what it should be doing, and that is making me absolutely have to pick up the next book. Again, this is on my pull list. I have to get it, You find a great exchange here in this storytelling. Again, your main characters, even if there are allies among your characters, there has to be some sort of discord, so to speak, or disagreement. Think about Cyclops and Wolverine. I know I bring that up all the time, but those guys are going to fight always, but they're allies, right? And so you get kind of an exchange here. And the awesome monster hunter shoves this restaurant manager down on the table, this new character that was introduced, and she's like, James, go outside. She's told him a couple times now to get out, while she shoved him down into the table. So again, for these last couple of scenes, there's 2 more scenes left. Here's something I hate. I want to say this first off the bat. Hate's a strong word, but I do hate it when comic book channels give up the goose, when they tell you exactly what happens in the very end, I dislike that. It bothers me a lot, and so I just kind of want to say that, look, if you're not reading this book, if you haven't picked this up, give it a shot, because at the end you get even more of an idea of the perspective that this writer and artist wanted to put across, and the big reveal that happens in this book. It just solidifies it, and you learn something very important about what's to come in the storytelling, which again, the last page is my very favorite page. Because it has a positive connotation, and it reinforces the kind of message that we wanted to get across about this one issue. And again, this story follows the serial format. It makes me want to pick up the next issue. I have to, because it leaves on a little bit of an emotional note, but it makes me feel that twinge of hope. And when you think about horror, it's all the way through it, it's grim, because you're really approaching these kinds of topics that they're not great to think about unless you're just looking at a story. If this was real life, the only thing that would really just sometimes make someone want to pick up another one is when they're like, oh, at the very end. And that's a feeling, that word, oh, the way that I said that, of course. And that's what you get. Again, this book, I can't praise it enough as a horror book. It checks off my boxes for great storytelling. Again, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of Tynion as we go along, and as I watch his writing become more rich and more flavorful and just more brilliant. And as he grows as a writer, he's become one of my favorites, and it's happened super fast, So again, I even made a video. I'll leave that one in the top or in the description below. I made a whole video about how I think that Tynion is probably the best bet to pick up the Batman series, the main storyline. Again, I love Batman, of course. I haven't been a huge fan of King's writing. A lot of folks have said that. That's fine, we all have our preferences. I'm sure that some people felt that it was the best thing. It just wasn't for me. I will say this, however, though. Tomasi's Detective Comics has been fantastic. If you're looking for some great Batman adventure stories that feel classic, with him just being this powerful raw force and a detective at the same time, and look, even confronting some emotional things, some inside of him, inside of Bruce Wayne. If you're looking for all of that in a Batman comic, check out Detective Comics. They just started a new arc with Freeze as the main villain, and it is fantastic so far. I've read both of the 2 newest ones. That was 1012 and 1013. I'm going to be doing a review on that one eventually as well. I know I'm a little bit behind because it came out a couple weeks ago, but hey, it is what it is. Once again, thank you for joining me. I love to talk about writing in comic books, how writing applies to comics, and I really am spending time covering what makes this good writing, in my opinion. Again, it's all opinion, but I hope you'll enjoy what I have to say about some of my favorite books that I've been reading. You are the gateway into comics.